and players smiling.
But Michael Jordan is not only the best basketball player, but he's the most exciting basketball player to ever play.
Tatum fires away, pumps it in, 51 for Jason Tatum.
The Big Three NBA podcast is powered by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official wagering partner of the CLNS Media Network.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Big Three NBA podcast. I'm Kwani Lunis, joined by Sherrod Blakely. We have a mini podcast for you this week, sandwiched right between a very horrific, I would say, loss to the Bucks, and then, of course, the Houston Rockets, where they welcome back their former head coach, Ime Udoka. But let's just quickly go into that Bucks game. Sherrod, we were just talking a little bit about the fact that at one point, it seemed like Joe Mazzulla was just like, I'm taking out the starters. We're throwing everybody else in against the Bucks, the Milwaukee Bucks. So what was your take in analysis of that decision from the coach?
Well, this is the thing about Joe Mazzulla. And I've said this on, many, many times. And Joe is becoming a better coach. He's figuring out some things that normally I just don't think he really had a handle on. And he realized at the half that, look, my guys are back. We are not going to win this game. All I'm simply doing is just throwing them out there to the wolves to just wear and just unnecessary wear and tear if I put them out there. And so he did the very atypical NBA coaching move and benched his entire starting five for the entire second half. And it was pretty clear that he wasn't upset or angry that, they played so bad. He just realized that we're not going to win this game. So what am I doing by just throwing them out there just to have them out there? And I thought it was a smart move because the game was lost. Milwaukee, to me, it was just the absolute perfect storm where the Celtics were on the back end of a back-to-back. They had just played the best team in the NBA other than themselves in overtime. Meanwhile, you're playing a Milwaukee team that had lost a few games, hungry to get back into the win column, was well-rested. You look at all the factors, that the absolute facts for both teams going into this game, and it was pretty clear that Milwaukee should win this thing and win it going away, and they did just that. For his end of the bench guys, they got some burn they otherwise get. For his starters, they got some rest in a game that that they just did not have. And it happens from time to time. We get it. But if you're the Celtics, you've got a good half of basketball to look at and examine and figure out what the hell went wrong. I think the biggest thing that they're going to take away from it is just that they just didn't have that effort aspect that we typically have. And again, it could be mental fatigue, could be physical fatigue. It could be just simply they just let go of the rope and couldn't get it back in time to make that game competitive. But whatever it is, it certainly was an eye-opening loss for them, the type of loss that certainly you don't forget about anytime soon. But they don't really have a choice because they got another game right around the corner against a team that, while maybe not quite as talented as Milwaukee, there's some aspects of this next opponent that will make this a little bit more challenging in some aspects than a normal run-of-the-mill game against a 500 team. So I'm looking forward to Saturday.
Well, you queued me up perfectly because as the former New England Patriots head coach Bill Belichick, who just resigned, would say on to Houston, they will be, as you mentioned, playing the Houston Rockets. Ime Udoka, their former head coach, who I guess gracefully resigned / was fired about
those are some interesting descriptive terms you got there, Kwani.
Still TBD. I was very graceful with that one. But the Houston Rockets, they sit 9th in the West right now. Ime Udoka, still a contender for one of the top coaches this year. What do you make of this team overall, and why is this matchup so compelling other than the storyline itself?
Well, Houston is another one of those teams out west that is young, they're hungry, and they've got really good talent. It's just talent that hasn't blossomed, or it certainly isn't anywhere close to being, it's all that it can be. And that what makes them, I think, a kind of a feast or famine type of team, because you don't know what you're going to be getting when you play a team like Houston. I mean, they could be the world beaters that surprise a lot of people in being one of the better teams out west. And by better, I simply mean being in the position to have a postseason, whether it's a playing game or one of those last playoff spots, in the top 5, top 6 in the West. They are very much in the mix in that regard. But the Houston, they're a team that, to me, they're like maybe a step or two behind in Oklahoma City in terms of the way that they're built is similar to how Oklahoma City is built. But the one difference is that Oklahoma City has one or two clear, undeniable face of the franchise type players, whereas Houston is still developing that. Because right now, if you were to talk about who's kind of the face of that franchise, it's not a player, but more or less it's the coach, Ime. He really is what, for now, is defining Houston Rockets basketball, and it's a face that the Celtics are very familiar with, face that they leaned on heavily when he was in Boston, and had tremendous success. You look at that first year, your goal at that point is just to have a deep playoff run, and they didn't get. There are very few playoff runs that have gone deeper than what Ime did, getting to the NBA Finals in his first year. But obviously, some of the inappropriate relationship issues that manifest itself, which led to his eventual parting of ways with the Celtics. There's certainly going to be some uneasiness with his return, and I think that's as politically correct as I can put it. There will be some uneasiness, a little bit of tension, a little bit of awkwardness, because I think you're going to have a couple of schools of thought when it comes to Ime Udoka. I think you're going to have those who are going to see that this is the man who should be coaching our team right now if he didn't do X, Y, Z, 1, 2, 3. And then there's going to be the other school of thought I'm so glad he's not here, because all that selfishness that he did that put himself in the predicament that he ultimately found himself in and ultimately led to his departure, at some point that was going to hurt this franchise down the road. And so both of those worlds are going to collide on Saturday night. And I think it's just going to be really interesting to see how the folks, all the different stakeholders, are going to react and respond to him and his team in Boston.
The NFL regular season is wrapping up, but there's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets, guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. The app is so easy to use, and there are so many different ways to bet, like live same-game parlays. Find bets in the new Explore tab. Make a parlay in the Parlay Hub, the best way to find popular parlays, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/Boston and make your first bet a layup. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL.
I imagine, we get the pregame cameras of arrivals and the handshakes and the hugs. These players, they're pros. Let's be honest, they know they have to perform. So I imagine it'll be very cordial when it comes to the handshakes and the greetings. But what do you expect when we see that on the floor competition? Obviously, Ime is not on the floor specifically, but do you think this is a game where Jalen and Jason, in a sense, have a chip on their shoulder when it comes to making sure they beat their former head coach? Or am I thinking too much into that rivalry that could be there?
Well, I think there's a couple things that both of those guys specifically are going to be thinking about, because you have to remember that after they were a big part of why Ime Udoka wanted to be the head coach. They wanted a tougher,
that was their guy.
They wanted a tough love kind of coach, and they didn't realize, be careful what you ask for, because you just might get it. Because Ime was hard on them. Yeah. Ime was really, really hard on them. And when you look at some of the things that they are capable of doing now, the way that they handle certain situations, you would be remiss if you didn't give Ime Udoka some of the credit for helping build that mental toughness. I mean, Jason Tatum, this is a dude that can go out there and get you 25 and 12 and 7, and people look at him like that wasn't a great game. And for a player to have, statistically speaking, a number of really, really great moments, and yet still find yourself being heavily criticized, or I say consistently criticized, and it not affect your play, that requires a certain level of mental toughness. And I thought Ime Udoka was really good at helping plant those seeds. And the same thing with Jaylen Brown, who, I mean, damn near every conversation that you have about the Celtics, at some point, someone is crapping on Jaylen Brown. We do it on the Big Three NBA podcast. I mean, we find ourselves like, well, you know what, man, Jaylen in that left-handed dribble. Oh, man, but Jaylen, if you should have passed when he had 3 men open and said he took a 4 shot. But there has to be a certain level of whatever y'all saying is just going to roll off me. It's not going to affect me. And Ime has a lot to do with that. I'm more looking to see how Ime's players respond, because to me, that if you're the Celtics, you're not so much worried about your emotions towards Ime or his towards you. It's his players, because they are the ones that are going to play with a different kind of edge. I would not be surprised if we see hard fouls delivered more so than we normally do. And that will be their low-key message of basically saying, y'all might be nice, y'all might got the best record, but we got the coach. We got the dog coach. We got the true dog of dog
the
coach.
one that y'all didn't keep just because of an affair.
Exactly. It goes back to that, one man's trash is another man's treasure. Ime was toxic for the Celtics to keep around. It was clear as day they had to do something with that. And just because he was toxic in Boston doesn't mean he's toxic in a grand sense of the word. He has clearly found a place in Houston that understands and appreciates what he can bring to the game, because coaching was never an issue with him. No one, of all the different levels of criticism that Ime Udoka has received in the last year change, no one hates on the man's X's and O's or his ability to motivate. Everything that involved his departure had to do with things away from the game, not between the lines. So his players, I expect to play with a very clear and undeniable edge to them as a reflection of their coach. And to me, it's kind of their way of just kind of, in their own sense, rubbing in the Celtics face. Like, you see the edge that we're playing with? You see how we coming at y'all? He's the reason why we're coming at y'all. Now, what y'all going to do? The guy that I feel really odd for is Joe Mazzulla. Because Joe, it's like,
that was his.
You do realize, what's that?
No, but he worked for him, so it wasn't necessary.
Yeah, but Joe Mazzulla is still kind of evolving into what Joe Mazzulla's identity as a coach is. And he's getting better. But the thing is, he replaced a guy who came in with an identity that never changed. Ime came in as a taskmaster, hard-ass, defensive-minded, just a dog. And Joe, it's like, Joe likes to shoot threes, and Joe likes to play defense, but we're not really sure because they like to shoot so many damn threes. I'm really not sure how locked in they are defensively. So there's a lot.
Honestly, though, to that point, if you could argue, right, that Ime came from the Popovich coaching tree,
right,
and now Mazzulla comes from the Ime tree. So I think Joe Mazzulla's coaching definitely does reflect Ime as a leader as well, because obviously he's not directly off that pipeline with Popovich. Ime obviously soaked up enough where in his first year he was already able to set a standard in Boston. But I think that in a way, whether good or bad, it shows whether or not Ime was a leader in the sense of Mazzulla's preparation as well. And I think with anything you do, there's going to be an evolution and a growth. But one could argue that, did Ime set Joe Mazzulla and the rest of his coaching staff up to be successful? Obviously, he didn't plan on leaving the team, but that could be an argument of, yes, Joe obviously could have a chip on his shoulder, but that's not necessarily his fault for not fully having developed who his identity is just yet.
Yeah, that's a good point, especially when you take a closer look at the Celtics coaching staff. And Ime was only here for 1 year, and yet within that, since then, he's got 2 NBA head coaches that were on his staff, which is unheard of. I mean, you don't see, particularly 2 young coaches. I mean, we're not talking about like, the 25-year-old assistant that you bring in to help you get training wheels off your coaching. We're talking about your guys who are both under 40 when they got their first head coaching gigs after spending a year with you. And so I can see that. I can see that, but I don't think Joe and I don't think Will Hardy are going to be, putting out the pom-pom saying we are part of the Ime tree.
Absolutely not. Yeah, absolutely not.
He's one of us, one of him. They're like,
and it's apples to oranges between him and Pop. So that needs to be noted.
But you know what? It is, but when you look at just the way his attitude towards the game is, Pops is kind of like that too. I mean, Pops is kind of an a-hole.
But we've learned to love him because he's proven with winning that he's worth the struggle. Same with Belichick.
Right. And Ime, in an incredibly short period of time, quickly vaulted to the top tier of coaches in the NBA because he did the one thing that coaches, I don't care how you are as a coach, I don't care how the media likes you or how players like you, if you can win at a high level, people are going to give you your props. They are going to give you that. And Ime did it as he did about as good a job in terms of winning when it mattered most as any first year coach can do. I mean, he literally came 2 wins away from winning a title in his first year of the job. So,
whether your resolution is to save money, eat better, or stress less, HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit, is here to help you do all three. Say hello to your most delicious year yet with fresh ingredients and chef-crafted recipes at a price you'll like, delivered right to your door. Each HelloFresh box is packed with farm-fresh ingredients, and everything arrives pre-portioned right to your doorstep for less hassle and less wasted food. Don't let recipe boredom strike, because HelloFresh has more options than ever before. Dig into their biggest menu yet with over 45 dinner options to choose from weekly, and even more market add-on items that suit any and every lifestyle. For me, I'm a big fan of the pork sausage rigatoni rosa and the Gouda burgers, which take about 20 to 30 minutes to cook, which is not a lot of time for a really, really good meal. And in order to get in on America's #1 meal kit, go to HelloFresh.com/Big3Free and use the code Big3Free, and that's BIGTHREE free, for free breakfast for life. One breakfast item per box while subscription is active. That's free breakfast for life at HelloFresh.com/Big3Free with the code Big3Free, and that's BIGTHREE free.
All right. Well, overall, this I think is going to, like we said, very much a compelling matchup. What are your overall expectations on the court on Saturday?
well, I think it's going to be a close game, and if I were betting on this game,
On
I would
FanDuel?
bet on Houston to win. I would bet, I
On
think
Houston
because
to win.
yeah, Houston is not the better team by no means. They are
Mhm.
the better team, but the Celtics are undefeated at home. They've already set the record for consecutive wins to start a season. So they have already. This team is already etched their place in the history books of Boston Celtics for the way they started this season. But I just think Ime and his crew are going to come in here with just an edge. And even though the Celtics should be a little bit salty after that
That
Milwaukee
was
debacle,
whooping.
I still think that Houston is probably going to find a way to win. They're going to muck the game up. They're going to make it just a slugfest. And the Celtics are going to have, I think, a tough time putting this team away. And to me, there are going to be players who obviously will play well, Jalen Green and company. But ultimately, I'm putting it on Ime. I'm going to put it on Ime to figure out a way to get his team to compete and play hard and play tough and play with that dog that he coaches with. But to look at this matchup and not look at just some of the specific reasons for his departure, it would be we would be remiss if we didn't do that. Like there are factors that came into play that we still don't have answers to, that we're still not clear on exactly why this happened and that did not. And one of the things as time has passed, and point out, I know you've probably heard some of this too. There have been concerns and questions, which however you want to describe it, about whether Ime's race played a factor in his punishment and his departure. One of the things that like when I talk with different scouts and folks in the NBA about this is, what Ime ultimately did and was let go for was something that a lot of NBA executives and coaches have done in the past, and there was not nearly any type of punishment similar to this. And again, you don't want to let Ime off the hook and make it seem as though, oh, woe is me, you're wrong.
Yeah,
Because
he still
Ime
made
had
a very big mistake.
opportunities. What's that?
No, you're right. He still made a very big mistake. But I would argue that knowing Brad Stevens and us having been around him for the past, God knows how many years, I genuinely do think it was a character thing, and just understanding the way he holds himself as an individual and the way he wants the Celtics organization to be represented, and knowing the Red Auerbach way. I think it was definitely just the way the report said, the way Brad Stevens did not, this was against something that he had specifically called out. I would argue that probably bore a little more precedent than him being a coach of color, but I do still, he should have known better in that sense of, as a Black head coach in a league where it's already hard for opportunity to be earned, even if you've earned it, it's still hard for you to get that specific role. And it honestly, it was a miracle that he even ended up with another, opportunity there in Houston. I would hope that he understood how big of a deal it is to be a Black coach in the league and know that every mistake that you make is going to be magnified 10 times worse than any other head coach, generally would. So I think there are many factors, but specifically with this, I would say Brad Stevens sounds like the guy that put the nail in the coffin.
Well, for me, it became a moot point when Brad and Whit Grossbeck sat before us at the Auerbach Center, and he's talking about, the one time that they spoke about it to some extent, and Brad was speaking about how individuals who had nothing to do with this were being dragged into the conversation. And, we know who he was
women
talking about,
specifically
Allison Feaster, who had nothing to do with this at all, and yet her name was one that was prominently speculated about, which pissed off a lot of folks, Brad included, and just
including myself and you as well. We know
exactly, because we know actors, and that but listening to Brad talk about that and seeing him visibly choke up, because Brad is always Mr. Control. He ain't trying to show nobody no
ever.
And to see him visibly choked up when he started talking about that, I remember just being there and just kind of taking a quick scan around the room. And you could tell that this was something that organization was really pained over. The fact that one of their own was being kind of dragged through the mud over something. And to me, that's when it became crystal clear to me that this is something that has very little to do with the color of his skin and everything to do with the character of the man. Specifically when we learned that he was told for one time to stop.
Just stop. Just go somewhere else even.
Right. But the thing about it though, Kwani, and I've had a couple of coaches in the past who got up to really great starts, and it gets to the point after they have a really great year or two where they start feeling themselves. They start thinking they're invincible. They start thinking that they're bigger than the program instead of being a big part of the program. And Ime had felt as though he, after that year in Boston, felt that he could do no wrong. And I've seen coaches who, and the irony of that is that's when coaches do the most wrong, when they feel they can't do no wrong. And Ime, again, everything that we have experienced with Ime, in terms of media, in terms of coaching, in terms of all that other stuff, X's and O's, one of the best in the game. There's no qualms about that. But character does matter. When you look at the teams that win championships, and you look at their leadership, and you look at their organization, there's a reason why the New York Knicks don't win championships. There's a reason why certain organizations. It's true.
It's top down.
Character matters, and it matters particularly when you're talking about trying to win a championship. And Ime just did not align with what the Celtics franchise was looking for from a character standpoint. Now, Houston, different story. Wide the hell open. They don't have a specific brand that they're trying to promote, or a specific culture that they're trying to create a culture. They don't have a culture that's in existence. And when that's the case, you can take a chance on him, because what he's doing in Houston right now, it is strictly about X's and O's. It's strictly about coaching. Outside stuff, not a factor. And particularly when you've gone through the stuff that he's gone through, self-inflicted wounds, in my opinion. It's easier to focus on the X's and O's. It's easier to just make it all about basketball. And when you talk to the players, you talk to folks close to the organization, they've made it pretty clear that everything is about basketball at this point.
Yeah, I 100% agree. So after this game on Friday, they'll play in Toronto on Martin Luther King Day. By then, we will reconvene and give you our recap of both of those game analysis. Maybe if anything does go down during this Rockets game, we'll have a recap for you there. But until then, that's all we have for this week's mini pod. Make sure to share, subscribe, tell a friend. Make sure you're tuned in for that game so we can all reconvene next week. So until then, for Sherrod Blakely, I'm Kwani Lunis. We'll be back next week with Gary Washburn. We hope you have a great weekend.